Well, it's back in the 90s, and I'm at home eating supper, and as usual, we're watching the news. My dad has gotten over Star Trek, and it's basically been pulled off the air, so no more Next Generation while we eat our supper. No. Now it's all about the news. The 6 o'clock news. Oh, God. As a kid, hearing about all this stuff, it didn't take me that long to realize what part of the news actually made sense and actually talked about the world around us. For our city news, and like any other news system I've ever watched, the last 5 minutes of the news is the most important stuff, the business news. And back in the 90s is when one of the first trade disputes I ever heard of came out. The Americans going after my home country in Canada, our softwood lumber. And they kept going after us because you guys can do it cheaper. You guys can undercut us. You guys can do this. It's like, well, let me just put this in the context. We got a lot more trees than you do, which means we got a lot more supply than you do. Your people want our stuff, and you guys can't produce it fast enough. And we can. We have the industry. Well, as April 2nd, 2025 rolls around for us, good old Mr. Donald Trump is about to propose 25% tariffs on any vehicle or parts not made within the confines of the United States of America. He started an all-out war on the automotive industry. And who benefits the most? His right-hand man, Elon Musk, and Tesla Motors. But he doesn't know that the people he's about to piss off hold a lot more cards than he thinks. So today, AutoLooks is getting a little political, sorry to say, but we're going to be talking about the U.S. Automotive Trade War. Welcome back to the AutoLooks podcast. I'm your host, as always, the doctor to the automotive industry, Mr. Everett J, coming to you from our host website at AutoLooks.net. If you haven't been there, stop by, check it out, read some of the reviews, check out some of the ratings, go to the Corporate Links website page, big or small, we have them all, car companies from around the globe, and if they're not there, trust me, they're going to be coming soon. We actually have a new list of car companies that are going to be added to the website within the next few months, and we're slowly updating it to make sure that you're not clicking on dead links to old websites. All from the AutoLooks.net website. The AutoLooks podcast is brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbean.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@AutoLooks.net. So like I said in the intro, today we are getting a little bit political. Now, I'm not going to be talking about politics, but this has to do with a political climate. See, the American-elect president, Mr. Donald Trump right now, has decided to create or wage an all-out war against the automotive industry. And the funny thing is, he's attacking my home country and he wishes to annex us and make us the 51st state. What he doesn't realize is that Canada is sitting on one of the top mineral wealths in the entire world. We have the third largest known reserves of oil in the world, and we haven't even tapped a quarter of it. There's still lots more that we could take out. Mineral reserves, we're finding even rare earth metals that we only thought existed in Asian marketplaces. We're now finding in areas like Northern Ontario and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. We're finding all these minerals that we require to move into a greener future of either battery electric or hydrogen. All the minerals and everything is within the confines of our country. But just like us, the people that the U.S. is going after and starting this trade war with has a lot of allies on their side. I'm going to take you back, give you a little history about the many we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Canada, Mexico, China, the European Union, Australia, Philippines, Vietnam, all the major players within the automotive industry now, and how this trade war can work out against the American economy because they don't realize how intertwined they are with so many other countries, especially Canada and Mexico, ever since the creation of NAFTA in the 1980s. They don't understand how much they rely on the rest of us to keep them chugging along. Plus, they don't understand why some of these products are made within the confines of our home countries compared to theirs. Well, a little history lesson about Canada. Canada's automotive industry was created essentially by the Americans. We had a few small boutique manufacturers that started out at the very beginning, like every other nation around the world, with our only biggest one ever hailing from our country was McLaughlin. Now, if you don't know about McLaughlin Buick, we're going to be getting into the history of them in a future podcast. But for now, McLaughlin Buick essentially was created by Robert McLaughlin, who created cutters and carriages. He became one of the largest suppliers of cutters and carriages within the British Commonwealth. So, not just Great Britain, not just Canada, but Australia, Hong Kong, and India at its time. Yeah, all from Canada. His son Sam found out about the American automobile industry and thought that their father should get into it, and he was very reluctant on doing it. Eventually, he gave in and let them build cars. They started buying parts from Buick to build what they called the McLaughlin Buick, as it was later called in our country. Now, McLaughlins took the products and re-engineered them. Consider the fact that McLaughlin was ahead of its time and was literally a high-end product. When you bought one, you bought it for life. It was like buying a Rolls Royce. Their precision, the machining and tooling of their products was above everyone else. And that's what they did with their parts that they got. Now, as they transitioned into the automobiles, they essentially found new buyers. The American industry was essentially blocked off from everyone else. Back in the early days, a lot of countries had independence, and they didn't want other countries selling their products within it. Most countries ran independently. Now, Canada being a small population nation, at that point in time, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, with a population of under 10 million people, it couldn't support itself, so it needed help from selling into the Commonwealth nations. Being part of the British Commonwealth made it easier for us. It gave us a bigger market and opened us up, so we were able to build products within our nation and send them out. Because we were a growing nation, we were able to do it cheaper and more efficiently than places like Great Britain. Well, they used that to their advantage, and the Americans eventually used that to their advantage, setting up manufacturing facilities in Canada. Studebaker being one of the first ones ever to set up a manufacturing site in Canada, in Hamilton, Ontario, all set about building vehicles within our country just so they could ship them and sell them to the British Commonwealth. Because if you're able to sell into the British Commonwealth, it made it easier to sell into other European marketplaces. So they didn't even have to go that far. Literally, across the river from Detroit, you could build a plant in Windsor, Ontario, which Ford did. Literally crossed the river, built his products just so he could ship them across the ocean because there was a free trade agreement to Commonwealth nations. We can do it cheaper here because all the minerals and all the materials that went into building their automobiles, even in the UK, had to be brought in. Where in Canada, we had mines. My home city supplies tons of those minerals to build the automobiles. So because we had an abundance of raw resources, we could be sent into the States, turned into actual raw materials, and transformed into these products to be shipped all over the world. Well, this helped create our marketplace here. But as we grew and our economies got better, we eventually became as efficient and about the same cost effectiveness as our American counterparts. So with that, we were always fighting back and forth about who's going to get these auto plants. Most times they went to the United States because setting up in the United States, they knew if there's ever a trade war or anything else like this, they were free from all of that because everything is built in the United States. A few plants built in Canada only because mass subsidies came from the Canadian government to help set them up here. Toyota, Honda, they all got lots of money to come to Canada. GM, Ford, and Chrysler all got tons of money to stay in Canada. So we've been propping them up for decades just to keep the auto industry here. Now, because we build so many cars, our parts industry has become one of the biggest in the world population base. In the province of Ontario, 1 out of every 8 jobs in the province of Ontario is tied to the auto industry. 1 out of every 8 jobs. Even in my home city, mining is a big player here, but there's still ties to the automotive industry. Now, the trade war is not going to affect my home city, being the second least effective city in the entire country. Now, a city like Windsor, who relies on the other side of the river in Detroit, is highly affected by this trade war. So with that little bit of history, you kind of understand why our auto industry exists. The Mexican auto industry exists because as we grew and became more like our American counterparts, the cost of doing business and creating products in Canada was just on par with our American counterparts. The only thing they really save on is healthcare because our government pays for it. They don't have to pay for it here. But essentially, wages are higher than they are across the border, especially when you transfer it into American funds. Well, Mexico became a haven for entry-level products, similar to South American and even African marketplaces. And hell, 20 years ago, the Chinese marketplace. They were all havens for cheap vehicles with very low pay rates and an industry that could be supplied by anything. You could literally go there and set up shop super easily because the red tape was bare minimum. So it was cheap to to set up a shop. It was easy to get past all the government regulations, and you barely had to pay them anything. So you could build your entry-level products to still make a decent profit. Like today, Ford builds the Maverick in Mexico, and they do that for a reason. They do that because to build it in the United States, the cost would go up. It would be closer in line to what the Ford Ranger cost you. So they shipped it across the border into Mexico where labor is cheaper. They could do it cheaper, which means they keep the costs down on their product. Now, a lot of Chinese companies realize that Mexico is a massive automotive manufacturing site, all because of their dealings with selling into the United States and building cheaper entry-level products for the American marketplace. So their automotive market exists to service the American marketplace. Well, the Chinese know this, and they're now utilizing vacant plants that the American companies have left to come and set up shop because it's easier for them to enter the South American marketplace. They would love to use it as a jumping ground to go into America or even Canada, but unfortunately they can't. They don't want to set up shop in the United States to sell vehicles there because even in their home country in China, labor is much cheaper than it is in the United States. So their vehicles would cost even more being built stateside. Now, going into an all-out trade war with all of these countries, the Americans don't realize what they're about to do. They're about to drive up the costs of automobiles. Now, if you don't remember, last year we did a podcast about entry-level electric vehicles and why it's taken so long to get into that industry is because we need to decrease the costs associated with the battery packs to be able to bring down the size and sellability of entry-level products. If you look at the North American marketplace 25 years ago, you could pick up a vehicle for under $10,000. Under $10,000, brand new. Hell, more than a decade ago, you were able to do that. I knew somebody that did that. They bought a Chevrolet Sonic, went in, and they got it for $9,990. Didn't get any warranties, didn't get any bells and whistles, nothing. Under $10,000. Well, all of those cars have disappeared from the North American marketplace. After Trump's last term, a lot of these products disappeared because they created the $15 an hour wage set to the Mexican marketplace to ensure that they weren't losing jobs to the Mexicans. Well, that essentially drove all of these people out of the entry-level automotive marketplace. And without entry-level automobiles, sure, you reduce congestion on their highways, but now your mass transit systems are getting overrun with more and more people. You have to remember, in the United States, and even in my home country, Canada, we built ourselves around the automobile. We didn't build ourselves around public transit like the European Union or Asian marketplaces have been doing for the past 40 years. Hell, Canada just this year, 2025, has finally stated they're going to be putting into place a high-speed rail system going from Toronto all the way to Quebec City. Something they've been talking about since the 70s. But why? Because the entry-level market isn't there. Now that we have to pay even more to have stuff built in Mexico to be within the confines of our free trade agreement, the entry-level products have been nearly wiped out. Bringing them over from Korea, as Kia does, is one of the only options out there. But now with a 25% tariff coming into play, kiss those entry-level Kias goodbye. Because if Kia wants to keep selling the Rio or even the new K4 in North America for the low price that it offers it at, it's going to have to move production to the United States, which is going to cost them billions. All for what? 4 years. Because who's to say in 4 years, the next president that comes in gets rid of all of these and signs a new free trade agreement to open up the markets for all of us to work together. But by that time, the damage will be done. Why? Because countries like Canada, Mexico are already looking at other partners for free trade agreements. Canada is already looking into becoming part of the European Union. We know we can't become part of it because we're on the other side of the pond, but we're trying to broker a deal for free trade agreements similar to the Commonwealth Agreement that we once had with the UK. We're trying to get into the United Kingdom because hell, there's nearly 70 million people right there. Germany has already stated that they're going to spend over $500 billion on infrastructure and then put another $500 billion into their military just so they can give the boot to the Americans on their home turf. Saab has seen the writing on the wall and is now looking at building more fighter jets and more military presence for for European Union countries, because now they know all these countries are not going to be buying American. If they're tariffing us, we're not going to purchase from them. So the Americans are going to lose sales of their military products to the European Union. They're going to lose their bases in the European Union. And on top of that, the automobile companies that have been struggling to enter and stay in the European market are going to all but disappear. Chrysler is pretty much non-existent. Same with Dodge in the European marketplace. They have nothing people really want. Ram and Jeep are one of the only ones that have a presence there. Now, Jeep can stay on because a few products are built on the other side of the pond. But being known as an American car company, less and less people are going to be buying them. Why? Because European countries are going to now subject these products to massive tariffs as well. They're going to retaliate. You have to remember, a country like Germany can literally just cut off the Americans from their country and not have to worry. A country like Canada, with just over 40 million people, a little bit more different. We need to develop free trade agreements with other countries to stave off what we lost with the Americans. Funny thing is, there's 2 steel mills in the province of Ontario. One is Dofasco, the other one is Algoma. Dofasco sells a lot of their steel to the automotive industry within the southern Ontario area, but then the 401 belt between Windsor and Toronto, and the QEW belt going from Toronto all the way to the Niagara Peninsula. They sell a lot of their steel into those markets, and that's what they're still doing, because production hasn't stopped or slowed yet. Algoma Steel, being a company from Northern Ontario, knowing that they have to fight and live on a global market, is already cutting off all their ties with American sales. They're now going after military contracts in Canada now that we're building brand new warships and fighter jets. They're going after those contracts to take out the American ones that are part of it. They're now going after the pipe industry in Western Canada. Hell, the mayor of my home city is now fighting to get the Canadian government to help process our minerals within our city. So it's not just raw material that leaves our city after it's been milled. No, you get all the precursor stuff to build your batteries coming from our city. Because if we jump on that now, and we have all of that now, countries that can't keep up on those marketplaces, you have to remember, China still needs stuff. Their market is growing. Sure, they have an abundance of tons and tons of raw material, but not enough. Japan is another marketplace that doesn't have enough raw materials and raw minerals to develop its marketplace, to build all the semiconductors, engine blocks, and everything else it needs to create in its home market. It needs partners. It needs stuff from Canada. It needs stuff from the mines in Mexico. It needs stuff from Australia. You have to remember, Australia, half the size and population as Canada, just over 20 million people, is one of the richest mining countries in the world. Next to Canada, Australia has tons of mineral reserves, and they know how to exploit it to get it out of the ground. But they ship a lot to the Asian marketplaces. Anything that went to the States, that the Americans are going to be fighting them, well, they're not, because they don't build any automobiles in Australia anymore. Brokering a deal with Australia between the European Union can get all their mineral rights from Australia or Canada. Mexico is abundant with tons of minerals. South America is abundant with it. You have to remember, like I said at the beginning with softwood lumber, we have more of it, and we have more industry already pre-set up to make it. So when your nation can't support what it needs to buy it from somewhere else. This is what they don't get. This trade war is making it so that when the United States needs more raw minerals and needs more material to build all of these automotive parts and new manufacturing plants that are getting set up, the nations that they once had a free trade agreement with them are just going to look at them and say, no. Do you really think if we broker a deal with the European Union, or even China, again, has come back to us? We haven't gone to them. They've come back to us to try and broker a new free trade agreement between China and Canada. Hell, India has come back to the table and said, we know there's a major diplomatic issue between our two countries, but let's put it off and start working on a trade agreement. You guys have stuff we need because we don't have it in our country. And we know America is cutting you off. So if you need somewhere else to sell it, well, buy it. But someone like the mayor of Greater Sudbury is saying, whoa. Let's put the brakes on this, okay? Let's make it so they got to get the end product from us. They get the precursor stuff for the batteries. They don't just get the nickel, the cobalt, and the lithium straight out of the ground from us. We're not going to pull it out of the ground, refine it, and then ship it over to the other side of the world. No. We're going to process that shit right here. Basically stating what the premier of Newfoundland said when the Hibernia oil field was first discovered. He was trying to force Shell, Exxon, and even Suncor to set up a brand new refinery in Newfoundland. The reason why the Hibernia oil field hasn't exploded with tons of development is because Newfoundland is still pushing for processing on their own province. They're tired of tons of oil coming out of the ground, and the only jobs they get are for supplying and operating these oil rigs. It comes out of the ground, gets put on ships, and shipped over to, it still stays in Canada, but it still gets shipped over to New Brunswick to go to the refinery in St. John, New Brunswick. Or it gets put on the boats and goes all the way down to Texas. Newfoundland's saying, no, we want the stuff that leaves our province to be the gasoline, the diesel, the synthetic fuels, everything else that you guys want to use our oil for. We don't want to just give you the raw minerals. We want you guys to at least get the raw materials. You want to make it into something? Fine. But we're going to turn it into the petroleum-based product that you guys want in our home province. Because they've been fighting for that, Hibernia hasn't taken off, but the Canadian government has been backing them. Now with the trade war on, they are backing them. The auto industry is a big player in this. Like I said, 1 out of every 8 jobs in Ontario is tied to the auto industry for the most populous province in Canada. Nearly 13 million people. And 1 out of every 8 of those people is tied to the auto industry. That's a lot. So brokering brand new deals between all of these other countries, processing all of this stuff within the confines of our own nations, telling people, we got what you need now. But if you want it, you're going to pay for it. All of these countries are now coming to the table. The United States has been kicked out of so many meetings right now for the trade war. They're literally secluding themselves away from the world. And as a lot of people say, well, it's the biggest consumer market in the entire world. Well, I'm sorry to say, but China has been nipping at their heels to become the world's largest consumer market for the past 5 years. And they're getting closer and closer every year. This might be the final hurdle that China needs to become the world's largest market. By creating more seclusion in the United States, they're going to basically, that top person that just thinks they're the world's greatest and they're better than everyone else. And eventually, nobody's going to call them to the party because everyone just does not want to deal with their shit. And that is where the track they're heading down right now. By doing this to the auto industry, one of the world's biggest industries, you may be able to get more investment and more plants into your country. But at the end of the day, when you need all the products and all the materials to build all of the products within those plants, you're going to have to set up a lot of mines. And when that's all mined out and all those materials are gone and your country can't support it anymore, where are you going to go? If the United States wants to take a lesson from somebody, look at countries that are heavily built up. Look at countries like Taiwan and Japan. I get it, Taiwan might be a state of China, essentially, but take a look at the island of Taiwan in the country of Japan. Do they have lithium mines, cobalt, nickel, platinum, palladium, gold, copper? Japan's got a lot. Taiwan doesn't. And yet Taiwan is one of the top superconductor producers of the entire world. Where do you think they get all of those materials from? Other countries. So do you think if they pissed off, let's say China or Japan or Australia, one of their biggest trading partners for the products they need, do you think those industries could support themselves? You can fight to get everything in your backyard. But when everything's in your backyard, you still need to support what's there. And if you don't have the products to support it and the agreements in place with these other countries, you can't maintain it. You know, when NAFTA was signed, the auto industry in Canada nearly collapsed because when it happened, the Americans didn't need to build vehicles in Canada to ship them to Commonwealth nations or the European Union. They could build them with the confines of their own industry, and Canada just became a subsidiary division. How did we become what we are now? We gave mass incentives, and we built up our parts industry by having so many parts built so close together and having some of the largest automobile parts manufacturers in the world right at my doorstep. We built the auto industry back. It's not as big as it once was, but it's still here. By creating a trade war, you may be able to destroy most of it, but you have to remember, there's a lot of countries that have had trade wars before. And when those plants shut down, countries buy them. Car companies can spawn from closed factories. Ever heard of Moscovich? Yeah, they disappeared. Well, Moscovich is back in Russia. After Renault closed their plant in St. Petersburg, it was bought out with investments from China and products designed and engineered in China. Moscovich is now back to producing vehicles for the Russian marketplace. marketplace. Their government took over the plant and is now producing more vehicles. So if the war ends tomorrow, all of those companies that pulled out of that marketplace are going to have to start from scratch again. Do you think they could buy back those plants? No, because the government has taken them over for their own homegrown product. And now that they built their own homegrown industry, it'll be even harder for other people to get into it. With 1 out of every 8 jobs in Ontario being supported by the automobile industry, do you really think if you manage to get GM, Ford, and Chrysler to shut down their plants here, it's going to kill the auto industry? It's going to slow it down, but we're going to find new trading partners to deal with. And those plants, there's a little thing in Ontario called Project Arrow, a whole bunch of part suppliers and engineering firms all banding together to try and build Canada's own car company. Shut down the plants, and that gives our government more than enough reason to invest a substantial subsidy into Project Arrow to get it off the ground and build Canada's own car company. Our market may not be big enough to support it completely, but guess what? By the time we get it off the ground, we'll have had agreements with other countries where we could sell our products back into, form partnerships with other countries. You get Project Arrow off the ground, we could form a partnership with BID from China to be able to sell in China, along with BID products, with BID products coming back here. Mexico can do it as well. They're already opening the doors and welcoming the Chinese investment into the plants that have been shuttered in their home country. Brazil is doing it too. They're welcoming the Chinese. As Geely has taken over the previous factory that built Troller. When Ford decided to shutter Troller, it put a ton of people out of work and completely shut down an amazing car company. If you haven't heard about Troller, go listen to our podcast, Trolling for Jeep. It's about the Troller automobile company and how it really should have been kept alive. Well, Brazil took over the factory and is now being transformed into a new manufacturing site for Chinese automobiles. Asian marketplaces do this too. The only marketplace that has literally lost its auto industry and never regained it or tried to create its own was Australia. But where Australia lost its auto industry due to the fact of its high wages. Trust me, you can't afford to manufacture automobiles in Australia because of the wages you have to pay in that country. But where they lost those manufacturing plants, they gained on mineral exploration. They have tons of massive mines that took over all those people, which are higher paying jobs. And those marketplaces want those products. So yeah, a trade war may seem like a good idea. But like I said, when you shut the door on all your friends, push them all out and start telling them that they owe you all that money you loaned them over the years, when you go to open your door at the end of the day, there's going to be nobody standing there. And that is what is happening with this trade war. We put NAFTA into place to benefit all 3 nations. We put it into place to keep the automobile parts manufacturers in business to help support the American automobile industry. We did it so we can have low-cost entry-level vehicles built in a Mexican marketplace. Without all of that, one country with high wages and massive amounts of bureaucracy is going to have major issues trying to build and grow an industry that it thinks it should have and own and control all of it. Do you really think GM will ever be able to make it in the European Union ever again? Hell, they sold off Opel and Vauxhall because they couldn't make it there. They thought they could do it with Chevrolet, and it's failed miserably. Chrysler is seen as crap in the European Union. And hell, even Ford is losing ground to Volkswagen now. The American automobile industry is dying on the other side of the world, all because of their pro-home antics. You can be proud of where you come from. I'm proud of where I come from. But you have to remember, we all live on this world together. And unless we all learn to work together, we're not going to get out of this. And hell, we're not going to get out of this in a good position. So at the end of the day, this brand new tariff war that's being set about by the Trump administration is going to become one of the most harmful points in American history for its automobile industry. It's literally going to bring it to its knees. The amount of parts that cross the border between both Mexico and Canada into the United States, and then products coming over from China and the European Union into the United States to manufacture vehicles is going to be hit massively. It takes years to set up all these brand new plants. And a lot of these companies are just going to pull from the market and hope that the next president won't do what he's doing. You just have to remember, everybody, as long as you have other markets that you're in and you can hold out, you can basically just pull from the market and do a hold and wait. What do you think a lot of the European car companies that left here in the 70s, 80s, and 90s have done? Fiat came back. Hell, Supra or Seat was thinking of coming here. All of these companies see that this market is huge huge and big that they want to exploit it. But if they have to do it from within the confines by building more plants to have overcapacity of their vehicles, they're not going to do it. They'll walk away and just leave the 3 American automobile industry titans alone. But with it, those 3 are going to be shut out of the global party. And that is what's going to happen in the end. Why do you think GM, Stellantis, and Ford all came to the table the second they heard about the 25% tariffs going into play? Because they knew they were going to be shut out of the global party if this comes to play. And right now, even with the changes they've made over the past month, it may still not be enough to keep them from getting kicked out to the curb. So tell us what you think about this tariff war. Do you really think that we're onto something here, or do you really think I'm just a crazy quack? Because I've heard so many things about Tesla and all that being kicked out of like auto shows in Canada, and reading stuff online about people going, oh, those Canadians, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're just a tiny little nation. We're going to take them over. Yeah. Have you ever watched anything about the hardest countries in the entire world to take over? Canada's number 3, okay? And we're number 3 because of our size. Just remember that. So tell us what you think about this tariff war and how do you think it's going to play out. Send us your comments. Write us at the bottom. Click the little like button at the bottom of this podcast. Like, share, a comment about it. Send it to your friends, send it to your family, and ask them what they think about this tariff war and what they think the outcome is going to be. Do you really think the automobile industry in the United States is going to get even bigger and grow America? Or do you think it's really going to be put out to pasture and kicked out of the global party? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And after that, stop by the website, read some of the reviews, check out some of the ratings, go to the Corporate Links website page, big or small, we have them all from the AutoLooks.net website. The AutoLooks podcast is brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbeam.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@AutoLooks.net. So like I said in the beginning, this tariff war may turn out to be either a good grace or a bad grace, but in the end, there's going to be a lot less friends sitting in the sandbox with them. Hell, the US might just be playing all by themselves. And trust me, when you work on a global scale, you don't want to be working all by yourself, okay? You need friends. So for myself, Everett J., the AutoLooks podcast, and the Ecom Entertainment Group, strap yourself in for this one fun, wild ride that this automotive tariff war is going to take us on.